You likely just watched extensive post-debate coverage from NBC News as the moderators were talking to the candidates right after the debate.
Yeah, we wanted to focus basically on the issues that impact Californians, and our expert analysts are joining us tonight. Reverend Dwight Williams is the San Joaquin County Republican Party chairman, and Kimberly Ellis is a Democratic strategist. Thank you to both for being here tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, of course, candidates were asked about their positions on a big range of issues, and as abortion was a huge issue in elections across our nation yesterday, we're starting with that issue, as we know that's also important to many voters here in our state.
We're better off when we can promote a culture of life. At the same time, I understand that some of these states are doing it a little bit different. Texas is not going to do it the same as New Hampshire. Iowa's not necessarily going to do it the same as Virginia. So you got to work from the bottom up.
This is a personal issue for every woman and every man. I am unapologetically pro-life, not because the Republican Party tells me to be, but because my husband Michael was adopted and I had trouble having both of my children.
I would certainly, as President of the United States, have a 15-week national limit. I would not allow states like California, Illinois, or New York to have abortion up until the day of birth.
And again, top of mind right now, Ohio voters approved a measure last night to put abortion access right into the state constitution. So how do the candidates' comments play here in California, do you think? We'll start with you, Dwight.
The comments tonight echoes the fact California is a pro-choice state, hands down. But there are millions of people in California that are pro-life. And those individuals are encouraged, not so much after last night, a couple of little bit of things of disappointment, but it forces pro-life community Republicans to reassess, deal with, like one of the candidates said tonight, from the bottom up, and to be able to engage specifically off with one-to-one situations so we can be able to effectively have a decent conversation without personal attacks. And that's really where this needs to go.
Kimberly, did you feel the same as you were listening to the candidates?
Yeah, I think Nikki Haley had the best line of the entire debate with her answer to that question, and I think it was the most honest answer. What she said was, this is a personal issue. It is personal not just for women, but for men as well. We need to stop allowing others to use this issue to divide us, and what we really need to do is focus on where we can find consensus. She said that it is not true to tell the American public that we can get a federal abortion ban. I think that her honesty, and as well as the only woman on this stage talking about this issue, leads people to really trust her on this issue, and I thought she gave the best answer.
And her point was really just, as president, you're not making the law. You can sign a law if it gets to your desk, but as things stand right now, it's not going to get out of the Senate, was
Absolutely.
her point.
Yeah, and just that tone overall seems to kind of ratchet down the tension when people come together to try to talk about those really tough issues like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we also heard the NBC commentators talk about Haley and DeSantis kind of pulling away a little bit from the pack tonight. So the question for you, Dwight, I mean, we realize that Donald Trump is the overall leader right now when it comes to Republicans, but can these two also appeal to Californians' sensibilities? I mean, what's your feeling on that?
Absolutely. Both Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis can appeal to California voters, without a doubt. The Republican base in California, though, is still overwhelming, just like with the rest of the country, for Donald Trump. But both Nikki Haley and I think actually, frankly, more Governor DeSantis would have more of a shot in California.
Why do you think that?
Because Governor DeSantis has more of a relationship with, especially within the Republican primary electorate and some of the Republican leadership, more of a relationship, especially organization is deep here in California.
Right.
Governor Haley's organization is not built to the same level as Governor DeSantis's. So, but frankly, still both of them are miles apart from President Trump.
So to that point, I have separate questions for each of you on this, but looking at the overall dynamics, and Kimberly, we'll start with you. On the Republican side, you do have a pretty big field and a lot of attacks on the front runner as they're sparring for this primary. On the Democratic side, you've got, the Democrats really coalescing behind the president. How do you see that affecting a year from now, the November election?
Yeah, well, I think a lot is going to be determined in the next, 68 days before the Iowa caucus. I think there's a lot that's going to play out with respect to the legal troubles that that former President Trump is dealing with. So I think a lot can change. That's a lot of time, a lot of time still on the clock, if you will. And so I think anything can happen. I do think that Nikki Haley and Ron DeSantis had a great night tonight. I disagree a little bit with the Reverend. I think that Nikki Haley would actually do better in California. As he stated, California is a pro-choice state, and I think that there are a lot of Republican women and independent women who would otherwise vote for Donald Trump or DeSantis, who are more aligned with Nikki Haley on the right to abortion and on the right to contraception.
So that does really lead perfectly into the question. So obviously Donald Trump is ahead in California, as he is everywhere in the Republican primary polling. What would it take for one of these candidates to knock him out here in California?
Possibly a conviction could alter, in one of the cases could alter it. Right now, post a conviction, Donald Trump here in California is solid. He's the front runner. All the polls show that. If a conviction happens, that could change the trajectory of how things are going, but we are in uncharted territory the way it is. The more the legal attacks against President Trump, the stronger he's gotten. So even if a conviction happens, especially if it's seen as unjust by many voters, and many Republicans think it is, President Trump actually could probably even still grow in the polls.
Okay, remains to be seen.
All right, Dwight Williams and Kimberly Ellis, thanks as always for providing your insight. We've got several more months of this, so we look forward to having you back here.
Yeah, thank
All
you.
right, thank you very much.
both.